listening to Muslimish Freethinkers, a podcast dedicated to fostering conversations on matters of faith and disbelief.
All right. I want to welcome everybody to our second session of the conference, the English session. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Adnan Jaafar. I'm a clinical psychologist and the public relations officer of National Muslimish Organization, and I'm also an organizer in the Detroit Muslimish. I want to first thank all the speakers from the earlier session. Thank you for the job you did. Your talks were all enriching and we really enjoyed, and we're looking forward to have the same experience in the English session. I want to just talk a little bit about the Muslimish and who we are and what's our mission. You know, Muslimish is an organization that began with a handful of people, that were looking for an outlet, for people of diverse backgrounds, be they are ex-Muslims, questioning Muslims, any kind of a Muslim who wanted a free space, a safe space to explore ideas and to be able to enrich themselves. So Muslimish is an organization that is very diverse. We have ex-Muslims, as I said, and we have different kinds and varying degrees of religiosity, faith, and what have you. At Muslimish, we advocate for a skeptical and a questioning attitude. We have no problem with any views. We respect all views and we're open to all ideas within the confines of logic, reason, and discussion. So we invite everyone to look at our website, muslimish.org, to learn more about the organization. One of our main important goals at Muslimish is to allow all Muslims to exercise their, free speech and free rights to express themselves without being afraid that they're going to be persecuted or they're going to be censored. One of the things is blasphemy laws, which we are really, one of the main reasons we want to focus on is kind of eliminating all blasphemy laws in the Arabic countries and the Muslim countries. Those laws that are really belong to the, Middle Ages, and we need to do something about it. So this is an introduction about Muslimish. But to go back or to come back to Detroit's conference, which is called Muslims in Dearborn, a pedagogical approach. So before, you hear all the speakers who I'm sure we're going to talk about pedagogy and the meaning of it, I would like to say a little bit about what's pedagogy. Pedagogy is an approach. It's an educational approach. It's defined as any methods or practices we use in teaching and in whether teaching is theoretical or academic, and pedagogical approach is broadly defined as the theory and practice of education and of how it influences the growth of learners. So it's a relationship that is related to how we influence others and mainly learners. It's a study of how knowledge and skills are exchanged, and it considers the interactions that takes place during learning. We always forget the importance of focusing on the context of interaction and the importance of it when we are, teaching others. I think earlier today, a lot of the speakers talked about the approaches in our community, which is mainly about not thinking critically sometimes, just memorizing stuff and repeating it. I think pedagogy encourages us to take into account the levels of the learners and the interactions within the learners themselves. So, in that context of this conference, our main goal is to begin a process of assessing and explaining and expanding our knowledge about educational process and approaches in our Dearborn community. And when I say Dearborn community, I mean Dearborn as a very multiply diverse community. Education in our communities is very important, and we want to start the dialogue between diverse fields of study. It's very sad that there is a lot of energies and educated people and different fields within the community, but they never get to have a dialogue. They never get to, bring their knowledge and expertise to the table. This conference today is an approach or an attempt to do that. We want to be able to share our ideas. We want to be able to share our experiences, and we want to be able to introduce, ourselves, as part, of the community. Not as people outside of the community. We are committed to our community. We're committed to its progress, and we're committed to its, diversity and freedom of choice. With that, let me start by introducing our first speaker for today. Our first speaker, before I read her short bio, is Fatima Ayoub-Salemassi. On a personal note, Fatima, I got to know her since last year in our first conference. I got to know a person who is really passionate and independent and fierce about, helping and advocating science and freedom of speech in our community. She's a fierce feminist. We always have nice discussions. So I'm really proud to have you as a friend in the last year. And I want to also thank you for serving the role of being Detroit Muslimish president. She is the president of Detroit Muslimish, and she had played a big role in getting this conference together, alongside with Wissam Sharafuddin, who never tires. And, I don't know where he has this energy from, but he's always working nonstop, and we want to thank also Wissam. So, today, Fatima her speech her talk is called All American Muslims and the Politics of the Muslim Identity. So Fatima is a doctoral student of curriculum and practice at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. Her teaching and research focus on critical dimensions of language and culture, including the study of ethnic and racial communities acquisition of English and American culture within different social contexts. She is a native from Venezuela and of Lebanon background, which I might say a good mix. All right, with that, let's give it to Fatima for the first talk today. I'm gonna start.
Thank you. So my talk is going to be about all American Muslims, and for those of you who've never watched the show, I just want to show you the ad that was, was posted. Let's go. Sound good?
No, stay.
Environment was a bit more hostile. How old are you? You don't want to throw money on the table in the wrong way.
Our community is complicated, and even within our own families.
There is one outside of Dearborn. So how was the guy in to deal with a lot of criticism?
Yes.
We live our lives like everybody else.
I've been law enforcement for 19 years.
The most
important things are my family, coaching football.
You guys did good. So you fight till the end.
I really am America. There's no place anything but God.
So I learned about All American Muslim show from a colleague at the university right after it had been canceled. All episodes are available on YouTube if you want to watch them. So these are the families featured in the reality show. I copied and pasted the names from online just so you get to get an idea of who they are. So there were 5 families features of the show. The Amin family, Aoude family, Jaafar, Saban, yes, and Bazi family. And you're going to see their names later on in some of the slides. Let me see. The show featured several and different characters. What they all shared, however, was that every single character identified as a Muslim of Dearborn. Throughout the show, in all 8 episodes, the characters explored and negotiated their Muslim identity and in the context of Dearborn. So I'm going to show you an example of the dialogues between the characters, so you get an idea of what you want to see.
Some people will be able to convert, but they don't come with the full conversion. Yeah, I'm saying convert on my identity in my life. They don't understand that. It sounds religion, and you either follow it or you don't. Some are going to work through it. Exactly.
And accept people to convert and accept them because they're converts to be the perfect, to try and be perfect. But there's no such thing as that. It's not an it's lazy, know what you're getting at. It's not
So this is an example of a dialogue, and what I did is I decided to conduct a research on the speech, on the language that the characters use in the show, and I wanted to do a qualitative type of research. So I decided to do research into the oral discourse or the language used by the characters in the show to describe and explain their Muslim identity. The dialogue is already transcribed in YouTube. It was easy. I copied and pasted, and then I just had to fix little typos, I guess. And then after that, what I did is I transcribed the entire 8 episodes. I first looked for parents, and then I narrow it down into categories, and then I further narrow it down into themes. So it's fascinating. So for example, a repetitive and common pattern that I noticed as in the dialogue was from all episodes, from 1 to 8, was that the characters' constant negotiation of what is permissible and what is not permissible for a person who identifies as a Muslim based on their own individual knowledge and understanding of Islamic teaching and practices. So this to me indicated that most of the characters in the show were questioning Muslims. They questioned Islamic teachings and the way these teachings shape their identity. According to Ginan Rauf, she's going to be presenting later on today, questioning Muslims represent a spectrum, right? From those who believe but are unsure how to best perform their Muslim identities or duties, to those who still believe and identify as Muslims but have their own individual and non-mainstream conception of what a Muslim identity is, all the way to skeptics, right? So from the data, 3 main, themes emerged from the data that I coded. So the first theme that came out from the coding of the data was this theme. I know it's a little bit long, but that was the only way that really can describe it. So the first thing was Muslim identity was represented by way of interpretation and application of Islamic teaching and practices, right? So these Muslims of Dearborn in this show, they varied in the way each interpreted and applied their Islamic teachings and practices they grew up with, the way they individually interpreted those Islamic teachings and performed those Islamic practices represented their own individual Muslim identity. So here is an example of the dialogue. that I coded. And so for in episode 2, there is a conversation between Bilal, Lila, and Nina. And Bilal says, the Quran flat out tells us no drinking, no alcohol. Lila responds, agrees, and she says, you shouldn't be in a place where they're serving alcohol. Nina disagrees and says, but then again, I go to Red Lobster and I see everybody wearing a scarf, but there is a bar right in the middle of the restaurant. It doesn't make sense, it doesn't make you less of a Muslim. There isn't really a scoreboard. Hey, you are more Muslim than you, or you are a crappy Muslim. A big part of it is that is your belief and your relationship with God. Right? The second theme that came out again from the coding of the data was I labeled it as questioning gender inequality versus American equal opportunities. And these are 2 examples of what I mean. So in episode 1, there is a conversation again between some of the characters. Nina says, talking about a nightclub, she wanted to open a nightclub in Dearborn. So she says, I know that's not like a typical job for a Muslim woman, but I know that I can definitely do it and be great at it. Mahmoud is her business partner. He disagrees. He says, somewhere else, yes, but here in Dearborn, it's a little bit risky. You're a girl, you have other things to do. You have your family. Your club, a club is not for you. Really, a woman, she's not gonna handle a club. Did you ever see a woman on a club? Nina says yes, and they're really successful. Mahmoud disagrees. He says no, I don't think so. In episode 4, I copied another example. Suhaila is a hijabi. She wears the scarf. And she's a judicial, at the time she was a judicial executive for the 19th District Court, and she was reflecting in the dialogue. She says, what makes me different from others, I've sort of had my hand in a little bit of everything, and that's not the norm. Being single, progressive, is not what you normally find girls doing and aspiring to do in this community. In episode 4, there is another sample. I think it represents this theme, and it's a conversation between Shadia and Nina. So Shadia says, it's really only in our community that if women are not married, you live at home. And that's just how it is. And it's not a bad thing. It's an understood thing. It's really not a choice. Nina agrees and says, it's just for a girl. If I wasn't married and wanted to move out, my parents would go nuts. Nobody wants, where is your daughter? Well, she's not married yet and she's living on her own. Basically, a Muslim woman would be breaking every law. So a third theme that came out from the data, I also labeled as perception of whether the hijab is a choice or an Islamic duty for Muslim women. So that was the most fascinating theme that I found the most fascinating. So the Muslim men and women in this show have different background knowledge and understanding of Islamic rules on hijab. Men seem to have a stricter and a structural understanding of the rules as being mandatory for women to dress the hijab. On the other hand, women believe it to be an individual choice, although a preferable thing, however, not being necessarily mandatory, right? So these are 2 examples. In episode 2, there is a conversation between different characters, right? So 2 women and 2 guys. So Angela says, in my opinion, I'm considered fully 100% a Muslim and not wear the hijab. So then Nawal supports her and she says, for me to come and tell Angie or tell Nina, you're not being a proper Muslim because you don't wear the hijab, like, what the hell am I to say that to them? Bilal disagrees. He says, Islam is a religion and you either follow it or you don't. Another supports Bilal and he says, a Muslim woman who wears on the head is empowered because she controls what the men can and cannot see. And as men, we think sometimes, not with our upper head. In the same episode, later on, Shadia reflects and she says, Samira has been talking about wanting to put the scarf on. I'm not sure what her reasons are, but she's not an idiot. It's between her and her God. It's not between me, her, and God. Ali is Samira's husband, and he reflects and he says, I'm actually very happy that Samira wants to put on the headscarf because she's drawn more closer to the religion, to her religion. And I think that will help me get closer to my religion. In episode 5, there is another example I found interesting, and it's a conversation again between Nina Fuad and between Nina and Fuad. Sorry. So it's a woman and a man. So Nina says, I can't imagine being 9 and committing to something like that, just referring to wearing the hijab. So Fuad, when challenged by Nina about his 2 daughters, one 7 and 8 years old, they're hijabis, he says, why is it that a girl at that age that wears hijab, why can't she experience the same things or feel comfortable that she is wearing a hijab? Nina responds and says, from what I know about the Quran, I know it says a woman needs to be modest. Nowhere does it say that you have to wear the headscarf. Later on in the same episode, Fuad reflects and says, he's sitting right next to his wife, and he says, if our daughters were to feel at their teenage years that they have a hard time with wearing the headscarf, that would be very difficult for me. I hope that doesn't happen. Right? Yeah. And so I wondered, right? I wonder about the impact that of All American Muslim show had on Muslims of Dearborn who watched it. Right? So I had So I looked for research. I wanted to make sure that I was on the right track. I mean, should I just stop at critical discourse analysis, analyzing the speech, or could I actually interview Muslims from the community? So I found several sources that supported that idea. So one of them is Gramsci, and he says popular culture is a space for the working class. He also referred to the working class as organic intellectual, which I love, to the imagining scenarios of rebellion and to redefine their identity. So again, he says popular culture is a space for the working class to imagine scenarios of rebellion and to redefine their identity. So that supported really what I wanted to do because it was about Muslim identity. Let me see. Yeah, I guess. I'm sorry. Although the show was canceled after its first season, All American Muslim is still a part of popular culture. It's available on YouTube. And people learn from pop culture, right? Regardless the original intent of the writers or the producers, you do learn about, from pop culture. So for instance, people learn from popular television shows like Law and Order SVU. I do, I love that show. I learn a lot from that show. And therefore television programs have the potential to become a public pedagogy. So public pedagogy, according to Sanguine, are spaces, sites, and languages of education and learning that exist outside the walls of an institution. So these are my research questions, and this is what I wondered about. So I wanted to know, the Muslims of Dearborn who watched the show, identify with the families featured in the show. I wonder if they identify with individual characters in the show. And I also wonder if they, after watching the show, did they redefine and maybe even question their own identity? So, yes. This researcher supported also the idea of extending from, actually supported the idea of doing textual analysis, like the one I did, using this critical discourse analysis, and she believed that just doing textual analysis is insufficient. That is an insufficient method for audience research, and therefore she believes that researchers should examine how viewers make meaning and adapt to social structures. Right? So I did recruit participants. I use Facebook, and I also asked my members of my family, if they wanted to participate. So I was able to recruit 23 participants. All 23 participants identified as Muslims living in Dearborn and who stated that they have watched the show, so that was important. And they agreed to complete a short survey. 13 participants were female between the ages of 23 and 45, and 10 were male between 32 and 53 years old, so it was a diverse group. So the participants described the way in which they identified with the families and with individual characters in the show. Most participants wrote detailed descriptions of similar conversations and dialogues you saw on the show to those with their own families and friends about their knowledge and understanding of Islamic teaching and practices. Some of the participants, however, disagreed with the ways these dialogues went about in the show. They described their own dialogues to be more confrontational than the ones portrayed in the show. That was interesting. And they even said that their dialogues were sometimes even more aggressive. Unlike the dialogues in the show that were portrayed as calm and accommodating. So that was interesting. Some of non-hijabi women participants said that they did not identify with the experiences of the non-hijabis featured in the show. They described feelings of being discriminated against by people of their own community, and their Muslim identity being constantly questioned by both men and women from the same community. So it was interesting, and only because they didn't wear the hijab. They argued that the position of the men in the show about the hijab as being an Islamic duty for women was an accurate portrayal of their experiences with the men in their community. However, the position of hijabi women in the show as being understanding and non-judgmental of Muslim women who do not observe the hijab was reported to be inaccurate. Two of the non-hijabi participants wrote about feeling unease and wondering about their identity as Muslim women. One of the non-hijabi participants, for example, wrote that she identified with Nina and that she was not interested at all in ever wearing the hijab, and believed that Lina, like her, was really an ex-Muslim pretended to be a non-observant Muslim. Right. 6 of the participants, 4 male and 2 female, wrote that they did not identify at all with any of the characters. They identified as cultural Muslims and argued that some of the characters in the show, the same as many people in Dearborn who identify as Muslims, fit this cultural Muslim identity. You know? So I quoted Ali Frisbee. Yeah. So according to Ali Frisbee, cultural Muslims don't have a strong, if any, beliefs, but still take part in the rituals, holidays, and traditions. They reject the ideology, but they don't want to let go of the identity and the memories, the community, the family, and the sense of belonging. So it was interesting that the data really supported what he talks about. So the significance of this short, very small study was that popular television and popular culture in general are possible sites of informal learning that can indeed have an impact on the viewers. I think educators need to acknowledge that as well. Then, I think the last. So according to Potter and Peter McLaren, television does more than entertain. Television shows are cultural products, and as such, they reflect, reinforce, challenge cultural ideals. Television acts are a mirror and a model for society. I think it's the last one. So these are the concluding thoughts. It's just a summary of what I did. So All American Muslims as a reality show is a possible site of public pedagogy. Right? It is an example of how popular culture offers viewers opportunities for representation of identity, and in this case, the Muslim identity. It provided its Muslim of Dearborn viewers an opportunity to assess and redefine their own identity. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this talk, and I think you point to a very important area where we need to do more research in our communities, and we need to utilize all critical thinking and methods of analysis to, find certain patterns and learn more about our own community. So thank you. So our next speaker for today is Dr. Abbas Youssef. His talk is called Interacting with the Community, Expectation of the Secular. So before I talk about a little bit of Dr. Abbas, I just want to say also a personal thing. Dr. Abbas is a dear friend for a long time ago. He is a very passionate person about education, about encouraging people to pursue education, not only at the bachelor level, but also at the master's and the PhD. My career as a clinical psychologist, my doctorate in clinical psychology would not have happened without his sometimes pressure and, encouragement. So with that, let me just tell you a little bit about Dr. Abbas Youssef. Dr. Abbas Youssef was born and raised in a small village in South Lebanon. He came to the US for higher education in 1979, and since then he has been in the US. He studied electrical engineering and earned a PhD in the subject of artificial neural network as new approach to artificial intelligence. He is a research engineer in the automotive industry, working on control of autonomous vehicles. Dr. Youssef has adopted secularism and progressive conviction since high school days. He has been advocating social justice since then. He would like to be known as the soldier for social justice. All right, let's give it to Dr. Abbas.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Adnan. I hope I live up to the challenge and keep you alert after lunch. So just please, this is a very serious talk, guys, but a little laugh can help. It's a little loud. My name is Abbas Mahmoud Youssef. My name automatically reflects that I am from a Muslim family. And per most Muslims, I would also be labeled as Muslim Shiite, just because of the name Abbas. Of course, I was born in South Lebanon, and to a Muslim family. My mother was very religious, and absolutely done all she could to never miss a prayer. My father was not a devoted prayer, but a proud Muslim Shiite, and in particular with the stories of the courage and a humanitarian stance, in particular for Imam Ali and others. My father also was progressive and proud Arab nationalist. He worked in many areas in Lebanon and associated with many other communities than our village or our area. This helps us adapt his way of accepting others and learn from their experience as well. He had an open mind and encouraged us to have an open mind. This open-mindedness was evident in dealing with his friends from other areas and other religions and sects. He believed in the government is to serve all and be fair to all. He exemplified his belief by breaking all political protocols and asking for help from the government. He did not go to the county executive, for example, of South Lebanon, or to the representative in the parliament as the usual behavior. When I was 11 years old, he went to the Lebanese presidential palace in Beit Din and personally delivered a letter to the president of Lebanon. Imagine that, a peasant done that. At that time, the president was Mr. Charles Hello, and the question was what to do to ensure that my kids have education. By the way, we're from a small family in a peasant area. By the way, we had no formal school beyond elementary school that has 2 or 3 teachers in most of the time, in our area at that time. Today there is no school at all. To make a long story short, my father received a letter from the presidential palace recommending to visit the Human Service Department and see what they can offer. Of course, my father never knew that such a service exists. Visited and started the process. They, of course, recommended boarding schools. He chose to take us to orphanage, Nader, in a village called Diddi, 200 kilometers away from our village. There, I learned to live with people from different regions, people who believe in different religion than mine. All of us students lived under the same roof, eat the same food, share the same book, the same ball, and the pain of being away from family. There I became the young man that my father was proud to have, open-minded and getting formal education. He was happy when I talked to him about my Maronite friend from this village and my Sunni friend from Majd al-Anjar, for example. I really lived the best Lebanese experience of tolerance and acceptance. In addition, my mother was very supportive as well because she was also very spiritual and pure-hearted. She echoed all of my experience and supported me during that phase of personal growth in that direction. She always repeatedly telling me that religion is personal and you must be humane and moral first. I learned that I can be secular and do good for all. There was my first experience of truly living and believing in secular life, of what the environment offered me at that time. These are lessons learned from my religious parents. Since then, I have lived with secular principles until today that can truly be adapted as the basis of my expectation of my community, wherever I live. Just want to mention a few incidents in my life that has just put me on a different track, or on a track to support this, but in a different way. After 9/11, I was impacted, so I started the path to search for ways to truly reduce religious conflict. One day at lunchtime with our engineers in our section at Ford Motor Company, I asked my fellow about if he would experience what God asked Muslims to fast. He was Christian, of course. He was very negative and said something very seldom spoken. He mentioned that the 9/11 war is based on the teaching of the prophet of Satan. I know it hurts, but that's what he said, not the prophet of God. I was stunned with that answer, but replied that if that is the case, as a religious man, Mr. Bruce, you will never reconcile with Muslims because you think they follow the prophet of Satan, and therefore there is no reconciliation with them, as there is no reconciliation between God and Satan. He echoed that and said yes. My immediate response, Bruce, this is very dangerous to the world, and we have 4 billion people between Christians and Muslims, that we have no reconciliation between them. A few years later, I was working in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. There I adapted the principle to lay low and listen, and not to speak or lecture except about my engineering knowledge. However, I'm curious. It works, as people became very open with me. One religious engineer working on the project surprised me one day. It was the new year, around early January in 2013, and the project manager came back from the New Year vacation. I was greeting him and wishing him a happy New Year, just a happy New Year. The engineer quietly told me not to wish him that and never to celebrate their holidays. I was stunned, somehow to that level of extremism. He believed that non-Muslims are non-believers and we are in internal conflict with them. It wasn't long before I avoided this man with all I could. So both examples, Bruce and Achmat, are absolutely samples of religious extremism. It wouldn't be difficult to see the impact of such extremism these days around the globe. And by many different religions, the conflict will go forever, and that would be devastating to the world. So we absolutely need to do something extraordinary to resolve religious conflicts. I'm still positive and hopeful. One factor is essential here is for the safety of the community, my community. I concluded that the community must protect itself from such extremism on both sides, with a system that allows for reconciliation. Our community, as a minority in this country, has the utmost interest in promoting secularism as a means for security and prosperous for all. Our community would benefit from this system, and it will have the best for both worlds. First, the community would adapt the challenge to not only reject extremism, but also learn the factors that breed extremism and develop a plan to eradicate them or minimize their effects. So instead of rejecting all religion, let us look for a way to resolve conflicts between people from different belief systems. The important conclusion here is that if we want to understand or eliminate religious extremism, we cannot simply point the finger at another religion or another religious culture. We cannot deny the responsibility to consider whether our approach to religion, our religious culture, somehow supports, encourages, or fails to discourage extremism. In other words, extremism cannot be separated from the larger culture in which it emerges from. We must be willing to consider how this culture leads some people to become extremists. And that is the challenge our community must truly address. That is the challenge that our community, I believe, must truly address. We must look at which elements of religious culture can encourage extremism and how a religious culture can encourage extremism. You cannot separate religious extremism from the culture in which it emerges, of course. You cannot remove extremism without changing the culture. Let us look at some of the factors then. I'm an engineer. I like to have black and white. I live in digital, ones and zeros. That cause people to develop an extreme approach to religion. I know Alan always tells me that liberal art has many answers. You engineers have one answer, either one or zero. Well, I hope I'll put some engineering here. Religious people believe their religion is the only true religion. This exclusivity approach to religion this exclusivity approach to religion will inevitably encourage extremism because you automatically come to see all other religions are false. If a religion is false, it must be of the devil. So it's your duty to fight that religion. This must be God's will, and it is only for the salvation of non-believers, as my co-worker Bruce said. The second factor, many religious people believe that religion gives the absolute truth. That is, if religion is given by God, its teaching and doctrine must be absolute and infallible. Third factor, many religious people believe that religion gives complete truth that provides not only an infallible description of God, they also believe it's complete. In other words, they believe they must resist all changes in their religion. Again, this creates tension and conflict. Fourth, many religious people believe that their religion must be defined in terms of black and white. That's the best out of engineering I could come up with. The definition of terms black and white thinking. I wish they do that. Their religion is completely right, while all conflicting religions are completely wrong. Wrong reason for using black and white. They believe there is no possibility of a compromise. Fifth, many religious people believe their religion has only one possible interpretation, and so on. Many religious people also that believe that the world is an epic battleground between good and evil. Obviously, it would be naive to ignore that there seem to be evil forces working in this world, as you can see where we are. Yet many religious people define good and evil by saying that their religion represents good while other religions are not, or represent evil. Such a definition of good and evil can only promote conflict and extremism. The ultimate cause, many religious people believe their religion represents the ultimate cause. They are fighting for a just cause, backed by the ultimate authority, namely God. Therefore, everything they believe or do is right in an ultimate sense. This then makes it possible for these people to justify almost anything as being necessary in order to win the ultimate victory. Well, all these factors around related to black and white, good or bad, good and evil, one can conclude that as long as most of the world religious culture are influenced by some or all of the confrontational factors, there is no way to reduce religious conflict. It's not an optimist view. These factors not only encourage conflict, but they breed it. As long as such conflict and tension is allowed to continue, it is certain and confidently predictable, and some people will take this general culture into extremism and fanaticism. So, if we are to have any chance of reducing conflict, then we must find a different approach to religion, an approach that is not dominated by these confrontational elements. We must find an approach that promotes understanding, tolerance, and even unity among religious people. In that respect, it's extremely important to recognize that most religious cultures are influenced by at least some of these elements. Obviously, not everyone is willing to take these elements into the extreme. Yet everyone who tolerates these conflict-breeding elements is contributing to maintaining the general culture. And it is precisely this culture that leads to extremism. Our community is asked to address this issue, and I truly believe secular teaching will give us the tools to eradicate extremism. On this planet, there are more religious and sects than ever before. Therefore, any attempt to force religious unity will be doomed to fail. Also, seeking people to espouse to no religion or follow one religion is impossible to see the light. Thus, the world needs a solution with a different approach to religious tolerance and acceptance, a universal approach to religion. We must do something that has never been done before to approach the problem of religious conflict. We must begin by creating a new understanding, a new awareness concerning religion. Well, one example history provides us. For thousands of years, slavery was an integral and accepted element of most cultures. Yet today, most nations have voluntarily outlawed slavery, maybe except in some of the Middle East. How did this happen? It happened because of the gradual increase of the level of fights and the struggle of people of color or slaves against the immoral behavior of the slave owner and the strive for freedom. This struggle has led to an increased awareness of the value of a human life, and the abolishment of slavery was simply a natural outcome of this increased struggle. However, it supported the increased awareness of the immoral aspects of slavery and the need to move forward with a new set of beliefs for a new era. This led also to having a new awareness of many aspects of life, such as human rights, individual freedom, economic opportunity, and environmental issues, as we see in the world, all leading to one approach, and it has been in implementation for a while. In the West and our community, better adopted wholeheartedly, secularism. We can work as the catalyst to the rest of the Islamic world in promoting this approach, and the world will be a better place. Secularization is the as defined by Webster, is the transformation of a society from close identification and affiliation with religion, with religious values and institutions towards non-religious values and secular institutions. The principles of secularism which protect and underpin many of the freedoms we all enjoy, and they are. If we separate the separation of religious institution from state institution as a public sphere where religion may participate but not dominate, the separation of religious and state is the foundation of secularism. It ensures religious groups don't interfere in affairs of state and the state don't interfere in religious affairs. Freedom. Secularism offers us freedom. Freedom to practice one's faith or belief without harming others, or to change it or not have one, according to one's own conscience. Secularism protects both believers and non-believers. Secularism is about equality, democracy, and fairness. Equality so that our religious beliefs or lack of them doesn't put any of us at an advantage or a disadvantage. No religious or political affiliation gives advantage or disadvantage, and religious believers are citizens with the same rights and obligations as anyone else. Secularism ensures that the rights of individuals to freedom of religion is always balanced by the right to be free from religion. So, secularism also champions universal human rights about religious demands. It upholds equality, laws that protect women, gays, LGBT people, and minorities from religious discrimination. Our community is one of the small community in the West. These equality laws ensure that non-believers have the same rights as those who identify with a religious or philosophical belief. Anyway, it offers us equal access to public services, schools, parks, etc. Secularism is not atheism, guys. Secularism simply provides a framework for a democratic society. Secularism is simply a frame for ensuring equality throughout society. In politics, education, the laws, and elsewhere, for believers and non-believers alike. Well, most important of all, along with the freedom comes free speech and expression. Religious people have the right to express their belief publicly, and so do those who oppose or question those beliefs. Religious beliefs, ideas, and organizations must not enjoy privilege, protection from the right to freedom of expression in a democracy. All ideas and beliefs must be open to discussion. Individuals have rights, ideas do not. Well, in search of this subject, I discovered a program that I have accepted and are supported as a means to improve communication and dialogue among religious institutions and promote this program in the curriculum and the educational system. This program was developed by a group of graduate students at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. This case study of that group was formulated the plan when presented with the dilemma of two ethno-religious communities living in close contact with each other who are struggling for political or territorial control. I highly recommend that the educators in our community to review, research, and develop the necessary steps to implement such a program. They called it the recommended 4D. The recommended 4D plan that has 4 stages: disavow, discuss, develop, and delegate. Our first stage involved the teaching of disavowal, of violence, denial, negation, and renunciation of violence, in particular, religious violence. The second stage of the plan is to foster open discussion between different faiths, a true open discussion with different faiths, cultures, and socioeconomic strata. We don't have to believe in the same God and the same religious beliefs, but we must accept each other. That's what the open discussion should be based on. Once media, political, and religious leaders have disavowed violence and open up discussion, they must develop means to which open discussion and greater interfaith understanding can exist in the future. This involves designing national cultures, norms, values, and infrastructure that do not fragment, but rather unite people. Last one, the fourth one, once we have developed a global society and infrastructure that encourages nonviolence, open communication, and cross-cultural understanding, we can retire to the delegation, stage and enjoy peace, or at least fewer wars and senseless violence for all prosperity, for the prosperity of all. One of the biggest causes of today's worsening sectarian violence and religious war is that different religious groups are retreating into isolation. Instead of educating themselves on the beliefs, backgrounds, and values of other cultures and religions, people are becoming complacent and accepting an us versus them mentality. As we need this new culture that does not encourage that view, our community support and perhaps can start the creation of such culture that doesn't encourage that view at all. We need global citizens who recognize that all humans are moving toward common goals. People are open to communication and don't see people of different cultures or religions to be others. We also need schools, hospitals, market theaters, and parks that are commonly used by people of all sorts of backgrounds, not just certain socioeconomic, political, racial, ethnic, or religious groups. A paradigm shift of this sort takes much time. Here is the 4Ds plan: disavowal, discussion, development, and delegation. So long as we can disavow violence, effectively communicate, develop a culture of international understanding, and maintain this culture, we should be able to live with much less misunderstanding and unfounded hatred for those of different religious and cultural background. Peace is possible. All it takes is a little effort. I remain positive that the young leaders of our community would develop further these expectations and from a framework to engage into the community at large to secure its place in making the world a better and safer one for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Abbas, for your talk. And we're going to go now to our third speaker of the English session. Good. Our third speaker is Ms. Siham Jaafar. She is the founder of Images and she's the founder of Images and Perceptions Diversity Conference, and her talk today will be titled True to Self and Identity. Let me talk a little bit about Ms. Jaafar. Ms. Jaafar is president and CEO of 3D Consulting and Communications since 1998. She has been specializing in corporate, law enforcement, educational, and government diversity training. Her clients have included Wayne County Airport Authority, Immigration Services, and various law enforcement agencies. Educational institutions also were one of her clients. Corporate and government agencies, including private entities seeking cultural competency, equity and inclusion, and training. Siham is the founder and producer of the nationally acclaimed Images and Perceptions Diversity Conference, recognized in 2013 and 2017 by Corp Magazine as the Excellence in Diversity Award. Siham was honored by Wayne County with the Women of Distinction Honors in 2015. Siham is a certified mediator and is currently the Vice President of the Wayne County Dispute Resolution Center and the Chairwoman of the WCDRC Advisory Board. She is a Dearborn Heights Planning Commissioner and is a member of the Board of Directors for the National Association of Women Business Owners and is its public policy chairwoman. She is the host and producer of Off the Cuff with Siham Awad Jaafar. Siham was born and raised in Michigan and has called it her home for her entire life. She and her husband, Hassan, have two amazing children, Ginan and Alex, and we are really happy to have you with us today. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. No problem. I'm gonna put this for 25 minutes.
Yeah,
I will show you 5 minutes. Yes.
I don't think I'll be that long. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me today. What a wonderful discussion, Youssef. You hit on a lot of the major issues in regards to separation of church and state, and you're very technical about it. Fatima, thank you for your presentation as well. My conversation, I'd like to apply it as a conversation, is more true to self and identity. And the environment in our country right now is truly a sad state of affairs. People are empowered to hate, and that's really, really unfortunate. I'm not a religious scholar, and nor am I a theological expert. So I thought, let me stick to what I know. And what I know is really my story and how I sort of came to where I am now, religiously speaking, theologically speaking, and my mindset as a Muslim and as a human being, basically. I grew up on Canterbury Street and went to Salina School when I was a young girl. And it was in the 60s. I don't want to date myself, but that's a very important aspect, because there really were not very many Arabs and there weren't very many Muslims within our community. So it was a very small, tight-knit community. It was very rich in diversity. We had a very large Polish community, a very large Italian community. So I grew up looking at everybody and thinking everybody was like me. We were all the same, because I grew up in that atmosphere, and it was beautiful because the landscape and the environment was normal to me. There wasn't any difference. Whether you were African American, Italian, Hispanic, you were a cousin, basically. So we all grew up together, wanting the same things and needing the same things. After a while, the mosque on Joy Road in Detroit was built, the Islamic Center, and we found ourselves being part of that. Of course, my dad, God bless his soul, was a founding member of that mosque. So life sort of revolved around there. Mom was part of the women's group, and we went to Sunday school every day. But what was wonderful about that is we didn't just go to the mosque. We also went to the churches, and we went to the synagogues. And the churches and the synagogues came to us. So we were having these conversations about who we were, what we did, how we did it, why we did it, what our differences were, and most importantly, what our similarities were. And so that was really the concept of how I grew up. At the mosque, we'd have weddings, yes, music. Music was alive and well at the mosque. It was beautiful. We had gatherings, and life was really simple. And I was actually the vice president of the youth club, and we planned ski trips with mixed company. We had funerals at the mosque. Families actually sat together. Men, women, children sat together. And I think that's what I miss the most. I went to catechism so I could learn and understand more, because growing up, if you were a Muslim, you could not say you were a Muslim unless you understood all the other religions. You had to accept the other religions so you can say that you were a Muslim, because all the religions led up to Islam, so it was a culmination of religions. So you felt complete. You didn't discriminate, nor did you feel discriminated against, because it was a culmination of everyone. So you had to accept all religions to be a Muslim. And this is sort of really important to me. Growing up in that kind of environment, it was community, but it was family. I thought I had the hugest family on the face of the planet because everybody was my cousin, and everybody was my aunt, and everybody was my uncle. So ammo and khalto, or amto. So it was all very, very, very communal and very loving. If anyone was going to travel anywhere, all of us went to the airport to see them off. If anyone was coming, all of us went to the airport to actually welcome them back. So it was a very family-oriented experience. And it wasn't just the Muslim and Arab community. It was everybody together. And I think that's what I held on to growing up, and that's what really grounded me in who I am and who I wanted to be. And going to the mosque, the dress code always was very lax. You were welcome to the mosque, whatever you wore. The headscarf was not a priority. It was not something that you had to do before you walked into the house of God. You were accepted the way you are. And I remember many days we'd go, and Mom and Dad were very involved in the mosque. We'd go and we'd scrub the floors. So we'd be in our shorts and t-shirts scrubbing the floors, and it was not a bad thing. It was okay. So the headscarf kind of thing is really a choice for someone. And I accept that for anyone who really wants to do that and wants to believe that that is part of their religious aspiration. But again, it has to be a choice and not a mandate. And that was something that I felt started the concept of discrimination, because when I want to go into the house of God, I want to be myself. I don't want to be someone that I'm not. During growing up, you had to wear the headscarf if you went into the prayer room. Once you were in the prayer room and it was between you and God, that was something that was a mandate. But into the hall area and into the place where we had all the gatherings, that was not a priority. So I still struggle with that concept because I feel everyone has to be accountable for their own actions. And the concept of the headscarf really perplexes me, because the concept of a headscarf is to be extra modest, I guess, to avoid any insinuation from other individuals. But then again, that goes against the concept of being accountable to who you are and what you think about. So I'm not going to say any more on that because I don't want to get in any more trouble. During the process of being in the mosque, I actually became a Sunday school teacher. And I taught for quite a while, and it was a real wonderful experience. And I taught the kids that were in my class about acceptance, about religion, about a Prophet Muhammad, about Gabriel, about all the different things that Islam holds true, that really I found were more of a commonality to the monolithic religions than something that was different in nature. And I never knew, as a Sunday school teacher, I never knew there was Sunnah or Shia sects, because at our mosque there was a mix, and I found that later on, and that was really beautiful. So Sunnah and Shia were together with no issues, with no contradictions, and as a Sunday school teacher, I had no clue that there was a difference. It's the same Quran, it's the same book, and that was a wonderful thing that I still maintain, because the difference still boggles my mind. It's the same Quran, and the conflicts that are occurring, I cannot explain and I cannot accept. There was a time during this process that we would have a convention every year. And this convention, people from all over the country would come, and we would have music and dinners and social gatherings. And I remember this particular convention was in Toronto, and I was actually in charge of getting the music for this convention. I thought, okay, great. I booked the band. I put a deposit on the band. I made sure that they knew where they needed to be. And again, it was in Toronto. So we're having the gala. Siham, where's the band? It's coming. I paid the deposit. They're going to be here. Siham, the band's not here. Where's the band? I paid the deposit. So I go and I call the guy, and he says, we were canceled. Somebody called us and canceled us. And I was upset, and I questioned, why would you not give me a call? Who canceled you? Well, we don't have an exact, name of who the individual was, but this, X organization called and canceled. So at that point, that was really the turning point for me in regards to finding that things were starting to change. And again, this was the start of it was in the early 1980s that this kind of thing started to change. So I was still holding on and thinking, okay, this is going to be okay. There's something that is called Ashura, with a commemoration of Ahlul Bayt, and we used to commemorate Ashura every year at the mosque, Sunnah and Shia together. And it was just about the experience. And the conversation was always, how do we learn from that? How do we change those things? How do we come together? And how do we be who we are? My husband's probably going to say, please don't tell this story, but I'm going to tell this story. We were actually sitting down at the mosque, and it was just starting to change, and we were all asked to wear the headscarves, and I said, okay, fine, I'll wear a headscarf. And I actually spoke at every one of these, and I was asked to speak again. I said, okay. So I went up. My speech was, how do we come together? How do we learn from our past? How do we learn from our mistakes? How do we, bring people together? And I finished. I sat down with my husband, and also a friend of mine who was Christian, because that was normal for me to bring friends to these kinds of things and for me to go to the church and be part of theirs as well. And we had a mutual friend that was with us who was Muslim as well. And we're sitting, very normal, natural, and all of a sudden there's some individuals that walk through the door, and they had the black headbands, and they started pounding on their chests. Now, I had never seen anything like this. And it was a little bit nerve-wracking because I'm thinking, oh my God, what's going on? And it was all these men walking through. Now, my friend, who I grew up with, who was Muslim, actually was underneath the table because he was scared, didn't know what was going on. And my other friend, who was Christian, is going, sort of half underneath, going, oh my God, what's going on? And I'm thinking, oh my, are we being rushed? Is something happening in the mosque? And the only person sitting there laughing at us was my husband, Hassan. Now, all three of us, of course, were born and raised here, and he was born in Lebanon, so he was a little bit familiar with this kind of thing. So they were walking in, and I'm looking at him, and we weren't married at the time, but I'm looking at him, and he's got this calm, face and sort of smiling, going, it's okay, it's okay. So we get up and we sit down, and then that, I guess, was a commemoration of how Ashura was commemorated in different areas with the black. And so that was the true turning point in my life. And to be honest with you, I never went back to the mosque again because I could not understand that kind of display for something that should be more of a peaceful commemoration of history. So that was my turning point. Never went back. And then through that process of thinking, okay, this is a certain movement, but I am who I am, and I have to be true to myself. A friend of mine, whose mom passed away, his mom was Muslim, his dad was Christian, and he, of course, he practiced the Muslim faith. So he called me one day, said, my mom passed away. She wants to be buried next to my dad, and she wants to be buried in the Muslim faith. And I said, of course. Why is there a problem with that? And he says, well, I can't find an imam that will do it because she's going to be buried next to my dad. So in our search of trying to find someone who would do the prayer of someone that had passed away, it was a difficult find, and come to find out later on that these imams were so, and I want to say narrow-minded, that they did not want to bury this person next to someone that was Christian. And at that point, that was done. I was done. In regards to the practicing type of Islam that I was actually witnessing, because it was an oxymoron in regards to what I grew up with and what I valued and cared for. So it was very difficult for me to come to terms with all of that. I became a little depressed. I thought, this is my world. This is everything that I was as a human being. This was something that was part of me. This was something that I practiced. This was something that I loved. And for me, Islam meant acceptance. Islam meant a way of life. Islam meant love. Islam meant not hurting one individual. And actually in the Quran, I believe it says if you hurt a fly, if you hurt one person, it's as if you've hurt an entire world. So those were the theologies that we followed. And I believe that that is the true Islam that needs to be progressed. And I believe that the radical concept of what we see and the radicalism and the extremism in the name of Islam is something that is more fabricated and something that's more of a political aspect rather than a realistic aspect. But there was a movement, and there was a movement to create this more secular, less passionate direction of Islam. So leaving the mosque did not necessarily mean that I left who I am. I've always maintained myself and my religion and my sense of who God is. And what I love about Islam is that it's between you and God. You have no third party. You do not have someone that you have to answer to in regards to a human being on earth. You are accountable for your own actions. You are accountable in regards to whether you're a human being, a good human being, or not such a good human being. Through the process, I ended up meeting and knowing that Hassan was really the love of my life. He was very open-minded, born and raised in Lebanon, very open-minded and very open to the concept of how I felt in regards to who we were as Arabs and as Muslims. We got married and we had kids, and I wanted my children to learn Arabic. And I thought, okay, and I knew that they wouldn't have the experience that I had in regards to that community, in regards to going every Sunday and not knowing where we're going to end up, whose home we're going to have dinner at. And that was always very exciting for me growing up. But I knew my kids weren't going to do that. So we started teaching them what we knew. And I wanted them to learn Arabic in a controlled environment, as I did growing up. And I sent them to Arabic school. And a few weeks into it, my daughter comes home crying, tells me, "Mom, you're going to hell." I'm like, okay. It's news to me, but why am I going to hell? She says, "Because you're not wearing a scarf." Okay. So we had that conversation in regards to, no, Mom, I'm not going to hell. You're not going to hell. A scarf is a choice. You have to respect everyone that makes that choice. But you have your own choice to make, and you're not going to hell regardless of what that choice is. The week after, and I thought, should I take them out? Should we not? We had a discussion. We kept them in. The week after, my son comes back crying his eyes out. "Mama, what's the matter?" "Well, I'm going to burn in hell." "Why are you going to burn in hell?" "Well, a girl came and touched me and rubbed against me while I was walking, and I was told that I would be burning in hell." I was like, no, that's not who we are. That's not the conversation. That's not Islam at all. Not how I know it, not how I grew up. And I started doing more research. And no, this is not the concept of Islam. So we need to make sure that our children's children understand the concept of Islam and what it is, and that it is a loving religion. And it is a religion that defines who you are, a way of life, but you are accountable to your actions. You are accountable for what kind of human being you are. It's about humanity, and it's global. It's not a restricted vision of what we see today. So if there's anything that I want to leave you with today, it's that, to do your research, to understand that organized religion is one thing, but the religious concept that you hold in your heart to who you are, being a good person, doing the right thing, and allowing yourself to be true to you, and knowing that your conscience is clear. I always tell my kids there's 3 things that religion states: a clear conscience, doing the right thing, and knowing that you have done good throughout your life. To me, that defines what religion is. So through the process of trying to figure out who, what, and where, this thing turned off. How long do I have? 5 minutes? Okay. So we came up, we actually tried to figure out the different kinds of mentalities and sort of the clash of cultures when we had the influx of immigration come in, because there was a different kind of cultural shock between those that sort of were already here and born here, and those that sort of came and immigrated from different areas. So we came up with these 2 different labels, so the BTs and the BHs. So you had the born there and the born here. And no disrespect to anyone that was born there, but the mentality was a little bit different. And through my diversity training, I had to do a lot of research on that. So the born there sort of had this independent kind of mentality, sort of an independent work ethic. And the born here were more of a team-related effort. So trying to work through that and trying to figure out, the different mentalities and how we can bring those 2 worlds together became something that I really, really was concerned about. I was one of the co-founders of Friends United because I felt that through the conversation of religion, it was getting lost. And I really wanted people to understand that we are more alike than we were different. So the group Friends United was an interfaith group. And what we did was we brought people of different faiths, Jewish, Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, and they all had to sit at a table together in different areas, and they all had certain questions that they had to ask to each other. And during these conversations, people actually found out that they were more alike than they were different. People didn't know that in Islam we believe in Jesus Christ, and that he's mentioned 32 more times in the Quran than the Prophet Muhammad is. People don't realize that we believe in the Virgin Mary, and that we name our children Maryam and Isa, which is the Arabic version of Jesus. So those were the kinds of conversations that needed to happen, and that needed to make sure, and for people to make sure that the concept of what we were seeing on a political landscape was completely different than what the reality of that landscape was. So I know Youssef mentioned 9/11. So after 9/11 started, it was a real turning point for everything that I did. So I started a conference called Images and Perceptions Diversity Conference. And it really focused for the first 3 or 4 years about Arab Americans and what they were about and who they were. And through the process of that and through the conversation again, I was presenting with a gal, Guadalupe Lara, who was of Hispanic descent, and after I did my presentation, she came and did hers, and she would say, like Siham said in the Arab and Muslim community, like Siham said, and I thought, yeah, absolutely, we are alike. We are more alike than we are different. And so the concept of the conference became Images and Perceptions Diversity Conference, engaging the Arab, African, Hispanic, LGBTQ communities, Jewish communities, and that conversation was extremely, extremely important. And I find that people walked away, and they continue to walk away. This is our 16th year, realizing that they are fighting a process that they don't need to fight. Because if you look a little bit different than I do, if you talk a little bit different than I do, then that really should enrich my life, because I want to get to know you. I want to get to know your customs. I want to get to know your beliefs. And I want your beliefs and customs to enrich who I am and make me a better person. So, in trying to move forward and trying to maintain who I was and what I wanted to do, Is anyone familiar with the desiderata? Anyone familiar with the desiderata? I want to just share this with you because this is what I live my life by. And this is how I feel that every religious base should be a paradigm for. And it says, go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence, as far as possible without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even the dull and ignorant, they too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons, they are vexations to the spirit. And if you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans, and keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is real possessions in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery, but let that not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself, especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and the disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune, but do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars, and you have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be. And whatever your labors and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it's still a beautiful world. Be cheerful and strive to be happy. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Siham, for sharing your story with us and for being with us today. So our next speaker is Imam. I'm going to say your name, try to say it as best as I can. Salie Achmat, is that good? Okay. Dr. Salie, he's going to talk today about using pedagogy to edify, rectify, transform, reform, predict, and serve. I'm just going to say a little bit about Imam. He has been Imam and a spiritual counselor, marriage consultant, interfaith and interfaith champion, peace and environmental and social justice activist, and halal consultant since 1985. He has served 2 mega mosques in Cape Town, South Africa, and 4 mega mosques in Rochester Hills, Bloomfield Hills, Sylvania, and Petersburg, both on Toledo. And he also founded 3 mosques as well as Islamic studies programs at 3 universities, Auckland, Detroit Mercy, and Mary Grove. He delivers khutbahs and performs marriages, especially interfaith ones across the nation. Convalidation involves 2 clergy persons from 2 religions performing a wedding. His academic preparations includes professional and graduate degrees in Sharia, Arabic, education, business, and Islamic studies. He chairs doctoral business theses and Islamic studies PhD committees, and he traveled to 5 continents to speak on Islam and nonviolence, architecture, suicide prevention, and epistemology of discomfort. Dr. Salie completed a 2nd PhD degree on Sharia-centric hermeneutics. He served also as a Sharia court expert in Michigan and Ohio, and the list goes on and on, which I can't take more time from Dr. Salie. Thank you. Thank you. And 5 minutes, I'll show you. Okay, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Shalom alaikum. Sat Sri Akal. Namaste. Peace be with you. And my own Dutch language is Goeiemiddag. Now, I've mentioned here that pedagogy could be used to edify, and edify is, of course, a step higher than educate, where you are actually so taken in that you appropriate the ideas and the practices of other communities. To rectify in this storm of this information distortion, to transform. The person who's salih is also muslih, to reform, to predict predictive and transformative learning, and also khidmah, which means to serve. Teachers should always be leaders, and leaders are teachers. Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati. But every professor and every teacher should have the right to provoke and the right to be controversial. Every moment is a learning moment, including moments that other people see as failures. I attended a conference in London just a few weeks ago, and one of the sessions was just on failure studies. I think we need to bring that into our universities. But because of the multiple distortions of Islam, that just for non-Muslims, opening the Quran is edifying, knowing what our previous speaker said about Maryam, Virgin Mary, and Isa, and Musa, and many others. So how do we do this? How do we, what type of pedagogy takes place throughout Dearborn, giving khutab, sermons, khatirat, small lecturettes, interfaith weddings. Now some of these South Asian weddings could have anywhere from 200 to 2,000 people in the audience. And invariably there are colleagues and friends that are non-Muslim. So we always turn all our lectures in such a way that it's understood by the non-Muslim audience, or even Muslims who are not too familiar with Islamic terminology. We have masajid open houses, which is something very admirable. The community has become less insular after 9/11. And then there are multiple civic, political, professional organizations that constantly meet. Just last night there must have been 5-6 different programs in the greater Dearborn and the environs. On colleges, Ramadan events, invitations to nationally and internationally renowned speakers coming into Dearborn, and then we have our printed word, and we also have the social media. But not everything is black and white, and so engaged surrender is vital. Delivering khutbahs, performing marriages, especially interfaith ones, and we've mentioned about convalidation, where two clergy people are actually co-performing. And increasingly in America, it's not only the Ahlul Kitab does not only go from Muslim women marrying men of the Ahlul Kitab, but also the other way around, because of the sukut of the nas and the silence. Sukutu is the rahmah, we find in one hadith. Now, just I think a week ago, I spoke at Bin Jubail, and I didn't expect to be on the same platform as the head of the immigration and the head of the FBI, but we need that, because we need to educate, we need to engage even with those people that we feel that we need to protest against all the time. Last night again there was a Greenfield Manor Impact event where senators and congresspersons, US congresspersons and state officials at every level were present there. But almost at every event we have Shia Sunni scholars meeting each other, almost on a weekly basis. 3 days ago I had a funeral at Woodmere Cemetery, opposite Dix Road Mosque, 94-year-old Turkish Albanian women. Almost the entire crowd was non-Muslim. I imagine performing a janazah prayer with an entire crowd that is non-Muslim. The khutab, the sermons on Friday are often missed opportunities. The Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, Bashiru wa la tunaffiru, yassiru wa la tu'assiru. This has always guided me, that give glad tidings, don't scare people, and make things easy and do not make things difficult. But so often the khutab become an insult to the intelligence, interpretations that are disturbing and lack sophistication and nuance. We have more khutaba orators than fuqaha or mujtahideen or rasikhun fil ilm. And that's why people like Pamela Galler goes after Esposito and Tariq Ramadan, because these people have some type of, some type of finesse and some type of deep understanding. Muhammad Ghazali complained about incompetent scholars and ignorant followers, and this is unfortunately still the case, and too often we have the ulama were the F grade students, and now we are paying the price because we do not have the alim profession as so lucrative and inviting that our best minds and best brains are going to become ulama. So we'll have to revisit that. 2003, I did some research about rabbis and found that they were earning $300,000, excluding pilgrimage to Israel and educational benefits and entertainment benefits, and then they had a team of people helping them. The mosques are not the same. So I'm trying to let you see into what has given us the type of leadership that we have in the mosque today. The Arabic saying, al-ikhtilaf ni'mah, wal-khilaf niqmah, is something that we need to be very careful of. Islam has an epistemology of discomfort and disagreement, and there's also the mujadala imperative. وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, always debate in a way that is handsome, and comely and beautiful. And if we have that proper enlightened scholars, we will help to refashion identities and to revisit some of the interpretations that are rigid, inflexible. One of the things I want to do is just always never let the colonial enterprise off the hook. What I did is I found in the 1500s and 1600s, when the Dutch wanted to subjugate Aceh in Indonesia, they felt that the only way to subjugate certain parts of the Muslim world to kill enlightened scholars and sometimes put in their place the most narrow-minded scholars. You look at the fight between Shia and Sunni today, and a lot of those puppets who are very, very virulent against Sunni or Shia are often placed in there, paid very handsomely. Please do not let the empire, the neo-colonial imperialism, colonialism, do not let them off the hook, because they put damage that is in place for hundreds of years. We know the split of the Kurds, the split of the Punjab, the split of almost everywhere. We still have suffered that. So inflexibility, rigidity, rigorous binaries, destruction of non-scientific works, like religious works, all the credit goes to the colonial enterprise. I've done that, put it in my second PhD, and I hope to get that out soon. But there's a pedagogical principle that we move from the known to the unknown, and even if I tackle a topic like suicide prevention, I see what the Quran says. The Quran speaks about the Virgin Mary and how she would say, Ya laytani mittu qabla hadha wa kuntu nasyan mansiya. And in another place of the Quran would be, Ya laytani kuntu turaba. You know, we know the great poet who used to say, I'm not sure, Mutanabbi, Innaka asqayta al-arda khamra, ya laytani kuntu turaba. But that sense of feeling you want to take your own life and you wish you were not alive, that is very much part of the human condition. And so looking for ways to fight anxiety, fight depression, and fight negative thoughts, you could actually find it in the Quran, which is a very rich text in many ways. But our view has always been hum rijal wa nahnu rijal. Al-Shafi'i, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Arabi, Al-Ghazali. If they were men, we are men, and we have new tools which they may not have had. So that's mandatory for those of us who are thinkers to be ghair muqallideen and to be mujtahideen. But most important is also on continuum thinking. Sometimes we praise the West too much, but unfortunately the West has embedded rigorous alternatives. They've embedded this type of rigorous binaries. You're either the alt-right or the alt-left on some positions. You're either a Democratic, Republican. There's nothing really that you can be in between. And so that rich concept, al-wahda fil kathra or al-kathra fil wahda, that's almost lost on so many persons. It's important to teach those philosophical fallacies of slippery slope thinking. and Keatsian negative capability, that we need to be comfortable, complexity, ambiguity, and also whatever is complicated. On the LGBTQ, and there's another AI that you add to there, asexual and intersexual. We can mention the Utah Compromise. Utah Compromise says you are not going to show homophobia when it comes to homes and to education and to public spaces, but when it comes to religious houses of worship, the First Amendment should apply, that we have a right to interpret our faith the way we want. So the Utah Compromise was almost embraced also by Ohio, and that's something I really love. Wherever I go, whether it's in Dearborn or anywhere else, I use humor, storytelling, anecdotes, and I thought it's only children who love stories, but also adults. They love to go home with a little story. And so you could open maybe a story with a word play, like the golden rule is often not about those with the gold who make the rules, but it's something else. And when I get to a wedding, I maybe play on the word complete and finished. At a linguistic conference with all people from the English-speaking world, the MC asked everyone, all academics in the audience, what's the difference between complete and finished? And so they start to say when there's growth and the development and evolution, that's completion. And after 20 minutes, he simply said, when you have a good wife, you're complete. If not, you're finished. You start off with a little joke like that, and you really warm up the audience. And it's important, I think, to really use humor whenever we reach out and wherever we speak to the religious other. But even playing on words like masih and masih. Masih in Arabic from masaha, which means to heal, to touch, to have a healing touch. And Christ, peace be with him, healed the lepers and the born blind and the dead. But masih, masaha, means to distort, to conflate, and to deceive. And so politicians and academics sometimes and many others can become masih and not masih, antichrist and not Christ. And so healing versus hurting, you play on the Arabic word, and when we speak about shaheed, means a witness to the truth, but it's also a martyr. And really the ultimate for resistance is you are prepared to be martyred for the sake of the cause that you are following. But everything has a typology. Everything has a continuum. Bid'ah is not only bid'ah that is haram and kullu bid'atin dalala wa kullu dalala fin nar. No, you get bid'ah wajibah. Today we have schools, we have so many things that are bid'ah wajibah. Imam Bukhari spoke about kufrun duna kufrin, a kufr that's not really kufr. You get a nifaq that's not really nifaq, shirkun khafi, or whatever, shirk that is khafi, and something that is more halal or haram could be mutlaqan, and talaq could be categorical, and could be something that is not non-categorical, etc. And then we look at man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa min. Some of the scholars says man tashabaha biqawmin fahuwa min. So the difference between blind imitation, where you don't feel a sense of worth from your own community, and tashabu, which simply means you resemble what other people have. Salih and muslih or salih or sulh come from the same Arabic root letters. But the richness and the beauty of Arabic polysemes, we always bring that out. Even an Arabic play, English play on the word integrity and integration. If you have a salad bowl concept, integrity, integration means you retain every community's integrity. They do not have to be similar. They do not have to be assimilate. Plato mentioned that play is the highest form of intelligence, and so I'm a firm believer in theater, in films, in docudramas, in songs as pedagogical tools. And I think if we need to move forward, we need to think of Ertugrul and think of some of the Turkish and Malay plays and try to incorporate that, bring that into our communities. But often I think I was teaching 2 classes in Inkster, African American children at the 5th grade and the 7th grade. And very enlightened principal or inspector they had. How do I teach African American kids Arabic? And so I had to bring a lot of songs, and songs that we as non-Arabs, when we learn Arabic, that we had to learn in a playful way. Now we know Lughatul Arab, Lughatul Dad, and I would say maybe Lughatul Arab, Lughatul Ain. So we have a little song, Ain laka akali mu'akali mu'a'a wa mu'a'a'i a'i a'i. So I exaggerated, make them excited, and they want to scream out the song again. Dad laka dadalimu dadalimu dada wa mudada dadi dadi dadi. You take all the letters of tafkhim, ta laka tatalimu tatalimu ta. It becomes a little exciting, but it becomes interesting for children. And in the Malay language that we grew up with, the little bit that we had in South Africa, we have alif, dua, tetes, an alif, dua, bawa, in alif, dua, dapan, an, in, un. It's good for children. It's not necessarily something bad. And I would also argue that the hifz tradition that we have of memorizing the whole Quran, and even the qira'ah tradition that we have, would be useful for digital citizens. You ask any digital citizen if they know the phone number of their mother or their grandmother. They won't know. They only know maybe one phone number. A lot of Syrian students came and they could ace the MCAT and ace many of these difficult because of their memory work they've done through the Quran. So do not dismiss it, but in fact open up that hifz tradition to non-Muslims, open up the qira'ah tradition to non-Muslims. Sometimes the breathing processes that goes into qira'ah is good for anxiety, an antidote to anxiety and depression. So busting myths are important. What's important is also contextual justice, al-fiqh waqi' or situational. Imam Shafi rahimahullah changed all his fatawa and mu'amalat when he moved from Baghdad to Misr, to Egypt. Connecting the dots in globally in a global village is also important. Now, not long ago, we had the Islamic Society of Tampa Bay in Florida collected $2.3 million for 2,300 Catholic children that were in cages. You know, the migrant issue of Dhaka. And what we don't realize, the Uyghurs in China, there's almost 1 million of them in cages out in and so I think it's important to look at that. The interesting thing is, we may not like the Trump administration, but some people in the Trump administration are powerful and very vocal against this, what's happening to Chinese Muslims. So we have Marco Rubio, we have Mike Pence, we have Nikki Haley, and many others are very outspoken. We need to connect with people we don't like if we know it's going to have a better impact and a better cause. Islam has a hermeneutics of doubt. Intisar Rab at Harvard has 4 different appointments at the university. But Idra'ul Hudud bi Shubuhat, she takes actually that to a different level, where Islam actually uses doubt as a form of law to throw out most cases, and justice is all about the pursuit of innocence rather than the pursuit of crime and criminals. 6 verses of the Quran deal with fasting, Siham. Only 6, and that's a pillar of Islam. 620 ayat deal with qist, adl, and speaks against zulm, and 1200 ayat deals with love, rahmah, maghfirah, everything that's related to that. Islam doesn't have an oppression Olympics. We need to learn from the pain of others. And I would also argue, if we study what happened to the Cherokee, 5 Native American tribes in this country became fully Europeanized and fully Christianized out of 600. Those were the very people that were sent on the Trail of Tears. But what happened with the Native Americans, the women were always superior. It was matriarchal in many ways. They were superior to men. If you want to be European, if you want to be truly Christian, bring your women down here. Now, after you bring your women down here, accuse them of patriarchy. You know? And I think that's what happened to the Muslim world. If I look at Medina was matriarchal, more than patriarchal. Women taught. Women ran the marketplace like Shifa. They gave asylum like Fakhita, Umihani. Some of them ruled for 50 years, as Fatima and Lisi would argue. Now, last night I spoke about the right of women to wear niqab. In fact, I just mentioned in passing, two people ran up to me and said, how can you defend the niqab? So I said, no, if you understand democracy, I may not agree with the Amish, I may not agree with the Mormons, I may not agree with some evangelicals, but every woman has a right to her expression, even if I don't like it, even if I don't agree with that. So that's important. We also need to bust myths, not about ourselves, but other communities who cannot express and help themselves. There's often the myth of the given that all the poor are lazy, and sometimes you find people in Flint and the center of Detroit working 2-3 jobs, single women. They don't have health coverage from Walmart, and it's so many things. The poor are not necessarily lazy, but everything could be systemic, systematic, and structural. And those violences are violences we need to oppose. Robert Lustig speaks about obesity, and he blames it on the food industry. Now, history is important. Fighting capitalism, disaster capitalism. Naomi Klein writes about that. War economies, drones, etc. would be very important. And sometimes there's a master narrative that's false, and sometimes we have multi-master narratives. The Shia, Sunni master narratives on Karbala. And so we need to embrace those. But it's not important for us to find fault and every time see challenges, but offer solutions. In Surah Balad, وَأَنْتَ حِلٌّ لِهَذَا الْبَلَدِ could also be interpreted, وَأَنْتَ حَلٌّ لِهَذَا الْبَلَدِ. You should become the solution to this nation and to this country. Let me just quickly go through the headings and then come to a conclusion. It's important to see that many statistics have transformative impact, but there's also statistics about minorities that lie. And one of the works is the work of Thukufu Zubairi about those statistics. That's an important read because people who deflate and inflate some numbers just to harm other minorities and people they do not really like. Service is important, and we find wherever people promise service or they had a track record of service, it's easy for them to get 4.5 million for their campaigns or 1.5 million, etc. And lastly, I think it's by time that Muslims move towards a full Muslim-led dream university, very similar to Notre Dame and Georgetown. These are secular universities, but at least Muslims are in the driver's seat. They are on the boards of trustees. I've looked at many of our universities, and they wouldn't put Muslims in their boards of trustees. Very tokenism here and there. We come to teach Middle Eastern studies, and you have certain sacred cows. You cannot speak a certain way about Zionism. And so there are so many issues that we have, but also there's also the rape culture. Kavanaugh is just a tip of the iceberg. The rape culture, even at Ivy League schools, we need to challenge that. And so we need to look at some models within the Muslim world that could really reform and inform some of the things we do in America. And just to end off with a quote, dreams are not what we see when we are asleep, but dreams are what we lose sleep about. And we need to lose sleep about things that will bring a legacy of monumentality. Another lovely quote I love is, there are 3 patriots, 2 bad and 1 good. The bad patriots are loveless critics and uncritical lovers. The only good patriot has a lover's quarrel with his nation or with his community. And so we need to become good quarrel. When people say, you're not American, then challenge that and say, well, my narrative of true Americanness is that we are ontologically different, we are inclusive, we are this, that, and the other. So you actually drown out those other negative ones. And then lastly, let us always see the global picture, the 50,000 feet eagle's eye view versus the worm's eye view. We love that we may learn to live, and we live that we may learn to love. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Achmat. And last but not least, we have Dr. Ginan Rauf. Dr. Ginan is our last speaker for today. Dr. Ginan is an activist, educator, photographer, oral historian, and mother. She received a doctoral degree in comparative literature from Harvard University and a joint master's degree in Near Eastern and Judaic studies from Brandeis University. Dr. Rauf has taught in various institutions of higher learning, including Brandeis, Rutgers, University of Connecticut, and University of Bridgeport. She is the co-founder, along with her son, Sharif Ahmad, of a company called Narrative Lives that produce oral histories using various mediums, including photo essays, videos, and audio recordings. Dr. Rauf is a secular humanist and feminist committed to promoting critical thinking and the nuanced knowledge of human cultures. She is the Vice President of Muslimish and is currently serving on the executive board. Let's give it to Dr. Rauf. Thank you.
For staying this long. It's been a long day and it can get very hard to listen to so many speakers. That was a very hard act to follow. I really enjoyed your talk. I enjoyed all the talks. He gave me permission to be controversial, so I'm going to be controversial. I think it's very interesting that we've had so many talks about diversity and we haven't yet mentioned the possibility that there are people within our community who are not part of the interfaith designation. And this is a growing phenomena in our community, and a lot of young people come to me telling me that they have lost their faith. And I think the ultimate other in the Muslim world and in Muslim communities in the United States is not the Christian or the Jew or the Zionist even, it's the non-believer or the humanist. So I think that really we need to start thinking about that. So I feel like such a minority. I'm Egyptian. I mean, I feel like half the people I meet are Lebanese, and I'm not from Dearborn, so I am from New York, and I work with Muslimish there, and I'm really here to represent the humanist contingent in our community, that we are part of the community, we're part of your families, we're not here to insult people's religions or provoke. We really want acceptance. And so I would just start with that before I start reading my paper. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to do it from my computer. I did not have enough time to print. I didn't know that I was going to be coming to Dearborn even. So let me start. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So in her book, Teaching to Transgress, Education is the Practice of Freedom, Bell Hooks, the African-American professor and feminist scholar, recalls her experience as a child in an all-black school. That was before schools became integrated in what Hooks refers to as the apartheid South. She reminds us that in the apartheid South, black girls basically had three options in life. They could either get married, work as maids, or become teachers, or get married and work as maids without pay. For Hooks, learning at this all-black school was an experience akin to what she calls revolution, or learning as revolution. She describes for us the pedagogical practices at these segregated schools that would subsequently impact her own career as a university professor. This is how she describes her teachers. Most of the teachers were black women on a mission to nurture the intellectual growth of their students. mission. So teaching here becomes a mission, and it's a sacred space. The classroom becomes sort of the secular equivalent of where we can experience the sacred. The work of the mind, as she put it, was directly linked to the struggle against white racist colonization. It wasn't enough to learn about the world. One had to go out and change it for what she calls racial uplift, and for what I as a humanist like to call for communal advancement. There was no dichotomy in this kind of pedagogy between intellectual work in the classroom and social activism in the larger world. Students were treated holistically as embodied learners. So we're learners that have bodies. That's very important, especially important for women. Subjects who emerged from a specific historical context and needed to be known intimately as unique individuals, not numbers, in their own right. This pedagogy of freedom focused less on transmitting ready-made bodies of knowledge from an authority figure, rather than on cultivating the critical consciousness in the individual and liberating her from prevailing racist or sexist norms. In other words, the education in these segregated schools was to show these girls through love and acceptance and the development of the entire being, the body, the mind, the confidence, that they could be something more than what society was allowing them to be. Why are you looking? Am I clear? Okay. Home hooks. I'm going to quote what she just, a quotation that she uses to describe what it felt like, because it was very, very moving for me. She said, "Home was the place where I was forced to conform to someone else's image of who and what I should be. School was the place where I could forget that self and through ideas reinvent myself." And as she wanted to be a writer and a scholar at a time when the options for African American women in the apartheid South were so limited, and so school was the place where she could reinvent herself. Now you can see the importance and the way that somebody who is dealing with a lot of women coming out of the Muslim community who are leaving the faith in some way or the other and are trying to say, okay, so I am no longer a Muslim, I love my community, but I want to know who I am. Who can she go to? So my experiment now with some of the programs that I'm creating for Muslimish, such as writing workshops with women, is how can we help these women make the transition from what they are expected to be, whether that is in the larger society that tells them you can't be scientists or you can't be this, to what they're expected to be at home. And how do we help them land in a safe place where they can reinvent themselves? This quote is really particularly meaningful to me as a feminist and a humanist who is deeply involved with Muslimish as an organization that is seeking to develop educational programs for its growing membership and grassroots base. It's like the African American humanist theologian Anthony Pinn, who's also been a very strong influence on me, says, when people leave, where do we have a place for them to land so that they can lead flourishing, meaningful lives, which is at the heart and the core of humanist teaching? My priority as a feminist here is to broaden the secular movement, make it more welcoming to women and more affirmative to their legitimate needs or concerns. We know that not just in our Muslim, ex-Muslim community, but throughout the secular community, that the participation of men is much stronger than of women for many different reasons that I really can't go into right now. It bears repeating in 2018 that questioning a patriarchal religion or rejecting it altogether hardly amounts to overcoming deeply entrenched forms of bigotry, including sexism, racism, classism, homophobia, and transphobia. God may be dead or dying, but we are still left with a legacy of toxic masculinity. Male privilege dies hard, even in the secular community. It often morphs and assumes different guises. Kata Pollitt, a prominent atheist feminist and columnist for The Nation magazine, wrote a compelling piece documenting the rampant sexism within the secular movement itself. The gist of her piece is that the male-dominated atheist movement has ended up alienating a lot of women. She ends her article with a rhetorical question that can be read to both as a dire warning and a daunting challenge for those of us who are committed to building a more inclusive secular movement that is welcoming to women. Why would women join a movement led by sexists and populated by trolls? If this is atheism, I'm becoming Catholic. End of quote. There are other examples that continue to inspire. Sam Harris, the author of The End of Faith, for example, famously or infamously, depending on your perspective, said, "There's something about that critical posture that is to some degree intrinsically male." So the critical thinking is intrinsically male and more attractive to guys than to women, to explain why the more gullible sex tends to not embrace atheism in great numbers. That's a very plausible explanation, Mr. Harris, given the percentage of educated white men who voted for the guy tweeting frantically in the middle of the night. So this idea, this stereotype that we have within religion that men, and in a lot of philosophies, that men have more capacity to be rational and to reason, is cropping up in the atheist movement. I don't think there's much empirical evidence for that. So, sounds like a variant of the age-old prophetic tradition that states women are defective in aql, and nisa naqisat aqlan wa dinan. In reason, I mean, I don't know how you would, I think, translate that maybe as reason or intelligence, and deen. Gee, maybe bell hooks pedagogy of freedom can be harnessed here to help us link the life of the critical female mind to the social and political struggle against the relentless return of male supremacy, even within movements that view themselves as rational and progressive. The good news is that neuroscientists like Antonio Damasio can help us out with his hypothesis that emotion is in the loop of reason, and that emotion actually assists the reasoning process rather than necessarily disturbing it, as was commonly used. Emotion, then, far from being a denigrated, soft, feminine thing, is actually redefined by neuroscientists as a handmaiden to reason. You know, like, have you ever, like, sometimes my husband, I'm just going to say this, and I'm not bashing him at all, he's a really nice guy, but like sometimes one of my sons will walk into a room and I'll see a twitch, or I'll pick up on something emotional and I'll say, something's not right. It's like, oh, you're so paranoid, you're so this, come on, just leave the kid alone. La 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 la. Something is not right. Now, I don't just depend on my emotional hunch, but the emotional hunch is what gives me the sign that something is going on, and then I can pursue it with my reason. Oh, maybe his girlfriend left him, maybe he's too proud to say, and then the reasoning begins, and then the problem solving begins. What I'm trying to say is we need to have, when you only focus on rationality and reason, if anybody thinks that men are more rational, just go on Twitter. The point is we have to have a much more complex view of what constitutes intelligence and be aware of the ways in which intelligence has been compartmentalized, as if we are disembodied beings who only think with our mind, the way Descartes had the kind of binary dichotomy between mind and body, and that it is really much more complex, and we have to think about intelligence itself in a much more complex way. And I think it's a very important spiritual point, because when men begin to understand that intelligence is much more complex, not only will they stop denigrating us on religious or scientific grounds, but they actually begin to have renewed respect for the complexity of human intelligence and the different things that it does and that we need in different contexts. Because you can take an SAT test and be emotionally clueless. How many of you women know guys who are like that? You know, and so emotional intelligence, for example, is now we have bestsellers and we talk about it. This is really relatively recent. So what I am really suggesting here, or what I'm trying to do as I develop these programs, these educational programs for women, is to say that we can harness a kind of critical consciousness with what I call a radical love for our communities. Now, by radical love, I don't mean romantic love. I'm using radical love in the way that Erich Fromm uses uses the term love in a very interesting book called The Art of Love. And what I really mean by it is a kind of prolonged attentiveness to our students and to people in our community about whom we care deeply, and we can be extremely critical of them, but that criticism has got to be directed towards a loving concern for the growth and for the fulfillment of each person's flourishing and potential. Because in the end, what is humanism about? It is about providing the material, intellectual, and cultural resources so that we can allow our people or our children to lead flourishing lives. And I think this is an issue that really, really is particularly important for us who are coming out of the Arab world and who are coming out of Islamic societies. We have extremely talented people. I think the average Arab is 24 years old. The average Arab leader is either 59 or 69, I can't quite recall. And we are now living in a world where one of the most destructive public emotions that is being generated in the discourse is one of contempt and fear of young people. And so we need a radical politics of love that is going to be combined with our intellectual and cultural resources to do the kind of work that Abbas is doing. I was so happy when he was giving his sorry. I'm very small, so sometimes it's hard to, talk about embodied, you see, like literally that when short people are very often discriminated against because we can't move easily because, I'm doing this, that's an example. But in any case, I was very happy with the presentation that he did about the kind of work that he was doing with young people in the south of Lebanon, where the education is not limited to the classroom and you're engaging the entire body and well-being, and you know what the social, economic, and political problems of the people that you're dealing with, and you are committed to them as individuals, and you know them not as numbers, but you know them as individuals. So there's almost kind of like you're combining the role of the pastor with the role of the teacher. You're not just sending them out to go to college. You know each individual student, you know what they want to be, and you're trying to create the resources for them to help each individual person actualize themselves in the way that they choose. Because in immigrant communities, we also really have a problem of what does everybody's mom and dad want them to become? If you're really dumb, you become an engineer. If you're really good, you become a doctor. And if you don't know what to do with you, become a lawyer. If you really don't know what to do with you, we'll marry you off. And the oppression doesn't just come from where you're there. But as immigrants who are upwardly mobile, we also have incredible pressure put on young people to assimilate. And this really brings me to my next is that within the secular movement, I feel that there is, thank you so much, there's a real problem also with Islamophobia. And people don't like to use the word Islamophobia because they think that it limits free speech and does not allow people to actually critique the religion. Granted, but I still insist that there is a real problem with the bashing of the community, and there's a very fine line from when self-critique degenerates and evolves into self-hatred. So I'll give you an example. It's admittedly a very bad example, but Ali is probably the most prominent atheist coming out from a Muslim background. And I choose her example not because I think she's representative, but because I think she is the darling of mainstream media as well as the right wing. I mean, when she wrote her book Heritage, she didn't just appear on Fox, she appeared with Jon Stewart. And so there is a sense in which, and Diane Dixie has literally come out and said that there are some cultures that are superior to other cultures. And so the idea then for me as somebody coming out of a faith that I can no longer live in accordance with integrity, that I love my culture. And I think you have to be, as the previous speaker said, be extremely careful because I would argue that there is a lot of cultural supremacy and neo-imperial politics that is coming under the guise of secularism. And that Islam is being singled out. I can give you another example. Very recently, Richard Dawkins tweeted about how he really liked aesthetically the sound of church bells. But he found the adhan, was the call to prayer, extremely jarring and harsh. And I was thinking to myself, gee, so if I become a humanist, I have to become an Englishman. Thank you very much. I'll become a Shia. At least I can worship Fatima or something, you know? And so it's really, and I was thinking to myself, oh, God, dear God, give us the patience to bear the militant atheists who are using this kind of cultural supremacy to denigrate other cultural traditions. As humanists, I think we have a lot to learn from serious engagement with other cultures, and that the kind of cultural arrogance in this historical moment I find really stunning. So at a moment when we have the entire planet is endangered, and everything that is fragile is threatened, including the earth that sustains all sorts of human cultures. You would be hard-pressed to convince me that any culture at this point is dealing with this problem in a rational manner. Now, if you have the kind of cultural supremacy that is being given a free pass in a lot of the secular movements, is there perhaps something I can think of that we can learn about sustainable living for other cultures that we tend to have contempt for? And so I think we are in a moment, it's not just the Islamic world that is in a crisis, we are all in a crisis. And so I think, for example, of vegan, a lot of people are telling us that if you don't stop eating meat, it's just not sustainable. That the eating of meat is more harmful for the environment than transportation. So is there something perhaps that we can learn from cultures that do not consume this level of meat, who perhaps produce meat and who farm in ways that are more sustainable? I think we really need to realize in the secular movement that there is this kind of intellectual arrogance and cultural supremacy where people show up to some of, even the Muslims in New York I'm constantly dealing with, they deal with it and it is as if there is a kind of ritualistic reaffirmation of supremacy over religious people who are constantly assumed to be stupid because it's a kind of narcissism in the end. And I think that
Humanism, at its best, is Socratic. And at the core of Socratic teaching is know thyself. And so I really do urge everybody who is participating in the humanist movement to have radical, critical self-critique. It should be also at the core. And this means having really difficult conversations, not just with groups with whom we disagree, but sometimes most importantly with groups with whom we actually agree. I have been having conversations with a lot of the women inside Muslimish who have been complaining about the ways in which men within the movement itself are sometimes tone deaf to their concerns. So there was a film, I think, that people saw, and it was about rape, and the women were trying to explain to the men what that meant. And I think the idea is for us to be patient with each other because we are all at a different stage of the journey, but to push each other lovingly, and that takes tremendous spiritual discipline in order to look seriously into ourselves. And that is why in New York, and this is a very controversial issue, I decided that our first writing workshop was going to be for women only. And it was a very big debate within Muslimish because there were people who said, I left the mosque, I left the community because I was tired of the segregation. And so there were women who did not feel comfortable having an all-female workshop initially, and then there were other women who had been so traumatized and they felt that they could only express themselves and see who they wanted to become. We're using Ibsen's A Doll's House as sort of somebody who left, who exited a community, to get people to explore. And we finally came to the conclusion that we were going to have some events that were only for women so that they could feel comfortable enough because as embodied beings who were understood so that they can actually start to expand and explore who they were allowed to become in a supportive atmosphere. The next step is, I think, honestly, is that I think we're going to start to have to develop men's circles as well and spaces where they sit down and do the hard work and ask themselves, okay, so we've either critiqued the religion or we have left it, and we've critiqued, so many of us have critiqued the Abrahamic traditions because we feel that they are profoundly patriarchal, but now we kind of have to do the harder work that takes the most courage, which is self-reflection. I think one of the speakers had said we're not beating ourselves up as a form of self-flagellation, but because we believe that it is a spiritual struggle and the place in which we can grow and grow in community, because we don't grow if we're not trustful enough and honest enough and loving one another, again in the sense that we care about the actual growth of each individual until we have this. And so one of the women had been traumatized because we have a very militant atheist in the group who was saying extremely hurtful and destructive things, and we had to go and face him. And then she said that she felt that some of us, including myself, women in the leadership, were being complicit because we were so worried about how small our group is, how proud we were that we finally were able to get a group. And then we realized that it was very, very tough, that how sometimes we can say, oh, boys will be boys, you know how he is, he says these terrible things. And she said, no, that was traumatizing for me. And I think that was an invaluable lesson, and from that experience, we now have a Facebook page for women who can deal exclusively with women's issues where they can feel safe. We have to be very careful about the dangers of segregation, and we have to be very careful about not letting men off the hook, because very often the people who are already working on themselves and doing the really hard, radical self-critique that is extremely Socratic are precisely the people who need it. But it's a really fun group. And we're doing really, really great things, and we're really trying to expand our activities. So we went from just having conferences to now our members where we have, where we are producing, these workshops, and the hope is that we're going to have monologues that come out of these that will then become performative. And then that workshop will lead immediately into us taking them to a play by the Iraqi-American playwright, Rauf, who wrote a play called Nora, which is a rewriting in an Arab-American context of Ibsen's A Doll's House. So the idea is that we're educating people not just by putting them in classrooms, but by multiplying the kinds of experiences they have. So we're in the classroom, we're writing monologues, we hope to have them performed, and then we're taking them to the theater. The idea is to have, as Abbas said, education that extends beyond the narrow boundaries of the classroom, and above all, so many of these women depended, and the men actually, depended on their families and the mosque or community. So the sense of loss can be tremendous when people leave their faith. And so we have to also create community because we have to take care of the whole person. And therefore we have to resist the celebrity culture. So many people, say, oh, I can write my autobiography and I can become famous. Because you know what? No Christian or Jew writing a book about becoming a heritage in the United States ever becomes a bestseller. It's only the Muslims. Think about that for a minute. But I think our priority should be on taking care of each other or people and building a community where people can learn and be exposed to culture with love and humility. Thank you very much.
Right, I want to invite all the speakers to come to the podium. We're going to have about 25 minutes discussion.
I should have just printed it. لا مش حلو.
هي وحضرتك بس this one. Other questions? Any questions next?
First off, thank you. Everybody, spoke really well today, and I had a great time. I'm wondering if I could get kind of everybody's opinions about sort of the European Union resolution thing that happened recently that said that defaming the Prophet Muhammad was not protected free speech.
I'd love to talk about this.
I'd love to talk about this, but you have to stop me. This is really something. On our Facebook page, there were people who were very mad, and they were the usual people, and they said, oh my God, now somebody is going to stop my right to insult. And I think that there's a very big difference between, and I think in the United States we have some of the most liberal free speech laws in the world, but this is not the case in Europe. So there are certain things that you cannot say, and there are laws that protect, if you blasphemy against Christianity in England, for example, there are sort of limits on that. So I think that needs to be seen in context. And so I think if you are going to have laws that limit free speech and protect all religions, and I think it's only fair that you protect, if you happen to be a free speech absolutist, then I can see the argument for why people should be allowed to say that. I think my concern more is what can be done with that language to weaponize it. And I'm sort of also, within our movement, I'm interested in smart speech, strategic speech. Are we going against this radical love notion? Are we using this language in order to really enlighten or learn something new? Or is it being used and weaponized against groups that are very vulnerable at a time when you have Muslim bans, at a time when you have 1 million Muslims who are being put in cages in China? Is that the kind of person that I want? Does that person now represent my values? And for me, the question is a definite, that person does not. You know, this is, are you going to teach me something or do research about what the Prophet and say that you disagree with? That's fine. But I think this is just a cover for a kind of racial verbal violence.
I would definitely echo what she had said. I think you have to look at the basis as to why this free speech is being exercised in the way that it is. Is it there to incite people? Is it there to create issues? Or is it there because they're exercising their right to free speech? So I always believe it's all in the packaging, and you said it very, very, very well.
Go ahead. Yeah, I think we should constantly look at hypocrisies and double standards. When the Dutch cartoons were being promoted against the throwing of the Prophet Muhammad as someone with bombs in his turbans and so on, the very same newspaper refused prior to that to publish anything negative about Christianity or Jesus. So it doesn't go the other way. If we know here, Richard Dawkins praises the bells, but he hates the Adnan. And in Switzerland, they got rid of the minarets, and in Italy, they deported imams that are slightly oppose the master narrative and come up with counter narratives. Then we are not speaking of healthy democracies. We are speaking of illiberal democracies and corrosive democracies. And we are not speaking of healthy secularism, but secularism that is very, very slanted. So I think we should just constantly, if any of these speeches come out, the immigrants in Europe are being harmed, Pakistanis are beaten up in London, these are some of the realities on the ground.
Thank you all for this. It's a lovely opportunity for me to be here, and I'm honored to do it. Thank you all. Just the clarifications. You mentioned Fatima, which is the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. You mentioned Shia was. Did you mention that Shia worship Fatima? Or
I was being facetious, and I didn't mean to insult anyone. I was just saying that.
No, just want to get a clarification. What are your thoughts? That's all. Because I don't think Shia worship Fatima. That's the question.
I think she was being a little more.
I was being facetious, but I would also say that as somebody who grew up in Egypt, that I know that people may not, in terms of intellectually, in terms of the ideology, for example, say that they worship Mary, but all of my Muslim friends would wear Mary underneath their shirt, and if there was ever any rumor by the Copts that Mary was going to appear, they would be there, and they believe that she has barakah. And so I think that very often in non-formal and non-official religions, that there is a tremendous amount of saint worship. Sayyida Aisha, Sayyida Fatima, people go, and I think they do.
We respect those kind of people.
I do.
Extraordinary people, we respect them. But for you, particularly, do you believe Shia is?
No, of course not. Of course not. I'm sorry if I came across that way. Absolutely not. No, I was just saying, if this is what atheism has to offer, I'd rather do that. Okay. I was being facetious.
Okay, thank you. Very appreciate it.
I'd like to say in regards to this that there is a lot of disinformation in the world about different groups. It doesn't matter what it is, from religious all the way to atheism. I was in Saudi Arabia and I grabbed a book at the airport in Jeddah and I came to Beirut. In that book, I found so much information that is incorrect, absolutely incorrect. And I know for sure, because I was growing up in a Muslim family and a Shia family, and all the descriptions of the Shia were absolutely wrong, incorrect. What that means to me, there are people, I mean, that book should never be in the press, because if someone is doing the due diligence, I did a PhD, and if I want to say that Hafiz did this, I have to cite the reference. I have to make sure that the reference is well researched, because someone else might come and tell me, you did not reference that opinion adequately and correctly. However, in the world, I have seen very much incorrect information. This book should have never been written, should never be in the press. But as you know that people that try, I mean, the different groups, they try to blame different groups, as I was saying in my speech, that people say that even within the same religion, oh, these guys are no good, this sect is no good, because they do worship Fatima. They do have a book for Fatima. It's exactly the words that they have. The reason why I wanted to say this, because there is people who are paid to dismay, to say their own thing about each other. What I have proposed, and I really propose that this 4D plan I love. I think this is really the absolute thing. If we can live by it, if we can live that principle, if we teach our kids, our youngsters, our students from now on that, look, we really need to every single point, like what Siham was saying, no, we're going to hell. Our kids are coming and say we're going to hell. How the hell do they know? How could they tell this kid you're going to hell? How could they tell this girl you're going to hell because you don't have a hijab? This is absolute BS. This is absolutely incorrect and wrong. But people still believe in it. People still believe in it. So what I'm saying is, and I'm sorry I'll take a little longer, that the world is full of wrong information going around about us. We must have open discussion. We must have dialogues. We must have a real dialogue and true dialogue, open dialogue, not just telling someone that point the finger that you're no good because you say this and you don't believe and you don't wear that hijab, etc., etc., etc. Or, oh, you're Christian, you're Catholic. This is ridiculous. And that's all what I'm saying about my plan. Thank you.
Imam wants to say something. We can pass it on. Thank you.
Can I just come back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just very important if we speak as Sunnis or Shia that we do not treat our madhab as a monolith. Shiism is a mosaic. And you get the Jaafari, and within the Jaafari, you have the Usul and the Akhbari, and the Zaydi, and the Ismaili, and the Bora, and the Khwaja. And there might just be some people within that umbrella who come close to the Mariolatry that Muslims have accused some Catholics of almost making Mary the mother of God. So I do think it's very important that we do discuss and say, well, from our perspective and our subgroup within the Shia community, that's never the case. We never call Fatima radiallahu anha the mother of God. So I think our language is very important. One of the most important rules of emotional intelligence is that I always say, well, from where my understanding is at this current moment of this particular branch of Sunni Islam, this is where I'm coming from, and I do not speak for every progressive Muslim or every Muslim out there.
I just wanted to throw a challenge back at you. I really am making an appeal also for people who still follow the Islamic tradition to think also about the incredible amount of stereotypes that are made about people who don't follow a monotheistic faith, and the kind of stereotypes that we get subjected to. The idea that you can't be good, that you can't be an ethical person, or that you can't have a meaningful life. And I really would encourage you to think about the multiple ways in which we are referred to. I've had people say you shouldn't enter into conversation with them because it's harmful. When I got very sick and I got cancer, I was terrified of telling people because I was afraid that they would tell me that God is punishing me. And so so the pain really goes both ways. And I don't think Muslim communities, as much as they complain, and rightly and legitimately, about being the targets of Islamophobia, very often think about the ways in which they other non-believers. I just really wanted to throw that out to the community as a challenge. I think after Muslims are the most unpopular group, but I think atheists second. I think atheists come first. It's 1 and 2, yeah. So that's something to think about.
I have a question. Yeah, I do. Can you hear me? It's Youssef speaking. Yeah, because we're recording this way.
Oh, okay. I'm always nervous in the microphone. Just a comment, then a question. A comment for you, Doctor. I think that's your name.
Ginan.
The concept of segregation is not really black and white. I've taught at university overseas, and I know some of the schools are segregated. And if we look at what's happening here in the U.S., the Me Too movement, segregation can be good and can also be a bad thing. Right? Just clarification. In terms of, I hear Shia, Muslim, I look around the room, I see humans. I personally don't distinguish who's who, and do you have any suggestions for us here on what can we do to kind of eliminate this in-group, out-group, whether it's religious or kind of within social spheres? Think back of Alport, 54, and Bogargas, studied race relations in the U.S. in the 1920s, and this concept of social distance or empathy between people tends to change. It's a concept that changes from one place to another, right? So people who play sports, right, they get along despite their differences in terms of religious differences or skin color, because they have one common goal, which is to win the game. Folks who go off to the military, right, servicemen and women, they get along, even if they have one from Ohio, the other one is from Tennessee. Black, white, Hispanics, because they have one common goal, which is basically to survive and stay alive, right? So with these two examples that I provided, what can you tell us as human beings? How can we get along and kind of narrow that social distance between us and have more empathy for one another, whether we are Sunni, Shia, Muslim, Christian, we have it. Thank you.
I'll be very quick. I think anybody can answer this question. I think, first of all, in our community, the first thing we have to do is stop saying things with all due respect. I only say human beings because I think within the Arab community that I come from, I can tell you that racism is a major problem. Our communities and our organizations rarely go out and try to create real alliances with movements like Black Lives Matter. So, for example, even our own organization, and I'm being self-critical here, we should be creating alliances with the Black Humanist Alliance. We are fixated on certain groups that we very rarely realize how important these kinds of alliances are. And so sometimes we act in ways that are structural, that we're not even aware of. So I think the first thing we need to do before we say, I don't see color, I don't see gender, I don't see this is not race, this is, you guys are exaggerating, is to really sit back and do the hard bonding with people and truly care about people. People really understand when you're really genuinely curious about them and you're not just going and doing the tokenism, and you really we need to look self-critically at our own cultures and see the ways in which we practice sexism, racism, homophobia. It's rampant. We have to be more inclusive in ways that are real. We have to get beyond the tokenism.
You know, I love our community and I love our culture. It's a very, very rich culture. But again, I have to echo Ginan's words in that we as a community almost are sort of taught that.
Thank you for listening to Muslimish Freethinkers. Do let us know what you think of this episode at facebook.com/Muslimish. Don't forget to visit us at muslimish.org.